great topics to talk about. Number one, how to improve your credit yourself, and also how to get your house sold even if it's expired from the market. Today my guests are Rory Dunham from Allied Mortgage and Julie Shirey from RE/MAX Jefferson City. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well, let's start with Rory. Everybody wants to know what they can do to improve their own credit score.
That's a good question, and there's a lot of different answers that come to mind. I have to throw this out as just a standard disclaimer. The best way to improve your credit is to pay off any existing bad debt that you have, bottom line. However, understandably, sometimes that's easier said than done. There are a lot of professionals, myself being one of those, that will sit down with a potential home buyer and review their credit with them and give them a plan on what steps they need to take in order to improve their credit score. The reason I add the disclaimer of it's your responsibility to pay all of your existing debt is because I'm going to follow that up by saying oftentimes there are things that people do in an effort to improve their credit score that actually hinders them more than it helps. Case in point, every time something is reported on your credit, it has a date that it is opened and a date of last activity. More often than not, as negative accounts grow older, these creditors stop reporting. And so even though it may be an account that shows that you have a negative balance, it hasn't reported in 3 years. And in determining a credit score, not only is negative credit taken into consideration, but also distance, time frame since that negative credit. And I have seen people go out and in an effort to improve their credit, pay off every negative creditor they have. And in doing so, they bring some of those dated accounts to a more recent date of last activity. And so now, in the eyes of the credit scoring model, it looks as though the account that did have a date of last reported of 3 years ago and is 3 years old has now become an account that's happened in the last 30 days. So it's hard if you're not an industry professional and deal with credit every day to determine. I've done a lot of research on how exactly is a credit score arrived at. And it's very funny because when we pull our tri-merge credit reports for home mortgage consideration, we get information from all 3 of the major credit repositories. Each of those calculate and generate a credit score. And next to the credit score, it will tell you the negative aspects of that person's credit that is keeping them from having a higher credit score. Generally speaking, maximum credit score is about an 825 to 840, depending on the credit repository. And I have looked at credit reports of a person who has an over 800 credit score and that still lists reasons why their credit is not good.
Right.
And so it's very, very hard to discern if you don't look at credit reports every day and have a fluent understanding. And so my honest recommendation is that if pursuing, for example, home ownership is a goal, but you think that your credit is something that will prevent you from doing so, first of all, oftentimes the average person's idea of their credit being bad is not a reality. So that's number one. But number two, if you can get yourself hooked up with somebody that shares that common goal of home ownership with you, that isn't going to look at your credit and say, sorry, there's nothing we can do, but will tell you, we can't do it now, but these are the steps you need to take to get there. I've worked with a lot of people, credit repair, who have taken the suggestions, executed those suggestions, and come back 6 months later able to buy a home. So.
Okay, so there's not really a hard and fast rule of run out and pay everything off. It's come in and
there really is not. One thing that a lot of people don't realize, and this is, if you're a person that has, for the most part, always maintained your financial responsibilities, but still have that that credit score that is not what you think it should be, one of the first places to look is at revolving accounts, credit card accounts. What a lot of people don't realize is that if I've got a credit card that has a $1,000 credit limit and I utilize that full credit limit or close to, I'm penalized on my credit score. They give me the credit, but what they don't tell me is that if I use all of that credit, I'm going to be penalized. A good rule of thumb is that if your credit card, what you owe on your credit card and the balance that you carry from one month to the next, and let me tell you, if you pay your credit card off each month, this does not apply to you. But if you carry a balance from one month to the next and your balance is greater than 40% of your available credit, you start getting dinged on your credit score. And the closer you get to your running balance being 100% of your available credit, the more consequences you will have to pay. And I've worked with a lot of people that didn't quite meet that minimum credit score requirement. They went out and paid $200 on a credit card, and instantaneously their credit score came up to where it needed to be. So that is definitely one thing to take a look at.
Okay. Well, what about what happens if someone were to go out and sign up for debt management through Consumer Credit Counseling or some other type of organization?
At one point in time, if Consumer Credit Counseling or account managed by Consumer Credit Counseling appeared on a credit report, we were done. But that is not the case today. From a lender standpoint, we don't have issue with that anymore. From a consumer standpoint, they need to fully understand what that consumer credit counseling agency is doing for them, because what I have seen is that you consolidate all of your debts, you make one payment to that agency each month, they then distribute those monies amongst your creditors, but that doesn't always mean that the creditors are getting everything that they asked for. Mm-hmm. And so even though the agency may have a deal set up with XYZ credit card for $20 a month when the minimum payment is $50, XYZ credit card company is still reporting that you're not making your payment on time. And so even though you think you're doing the right things, and truly you are, because you're lowering your interest rate, you're expediting the payoff, the potential effects that it's having on your credit report can be tremendous if the deal that is reached is not making and satisfying the individual creditor. But on the flip side of that, I've worked with a lot of people who do manage their credit accounts through a credit management agency, and their credit is wonderful as a result of it. So it's just kind of important to know the questions to ask, to ensure that what you are signing up for states in there that this is going to result in positive history on your credit report. That's important.
Okay, so you should also check your statements and make sure all the payments are being made.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely, most definitely. And you know, I don't know the specifics of how those relationships work, but at the same time, I would want to make sure, whether I have to call the individual creditor myself, that this arrangement that has been made is going to reflect positively on my credit report. Because obviously, step one is to get those things paid off, but if you catastrophically damage your credit report along the way, you've kind of not served the purpose. So.
Right. Well, what about the other companies that say they'll, if you pay them a fee, they'll get you a higher credit score?
My experience has been that the services offered by those companies, and I am certain that there is quite possibly some good companies out there. These companies that promise credit washing, mm-hmm. make your negative accounts disappear, they are not doing anything that you can't do yourself. What my experience has been is there are a lot of loopholes in the credit industry, just as there are in all sorts of things. For example, if I dispute an account that is on my credit report, I submit that dispute to the credit repository, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, that's reporting that. They then, the credit repository, send notification to that creditor of the dispute, and the creditor has 30 days to respond to validate what they are reporting, or that information has to be removed. And so what I have seen to be true of these pay us $500 and we'll wash your credit clean companies is that if you ask them, well, it could take 3 months, it could take 2 years. And the reason for that is because they are going to continue to submit these disputes until it falls through the cracks. And if I dispute an account and say, this is not my account, or this is not true, I've paid this balance, and that particular credit institution doesn't reply, then by law, the credit repository has to remove that from my credit report. And my experience with those companies has been, and you can do that yourself as a consumer. Is it morally true? No, it's not, but it can be done. If you have the time and the diligence to be able to actively just stay on that sort of thing, you can do the same thing that they're doing. But it's not a, I guess the point I want to make is that my experience with these companies has been is that it's not a legitimate, hey, we just called up your creditor, we said some nice things to them, and they're going to take this off your credit for you. It's not that type of situation. It's all about finding the loopholes and utilizing those loopholes to your advantage.
Okay. Well, what would you say to the person that wants to buy a house, but maybe they've never had credit of any kind because they just pay cash?
Congratulations for not having gone out and borrowed a bunch of money to live on.
Right.
But that's a double-edged sword, it truly is. You know, one thing that that is available that a lot of people don't realize is the ability to do a manually underwritten loan. And just to speak on this quickly, in today's technology that we have in the lending industry that we're in today, 97% of the loan programs that we offer, we have the ability to take the information about who you are, where you live, where you work, what your income level is, what your asset picture looks like, and attach your credit report to that and run it out through an automated underwriting system. Tell it what we want to do. We want to purchase, we want to refinance, this is the price range, and it generates a response. Obviously, we're hoping for that approve eligible response. Sometimes it comes back and says, no, it's just not going to work. And sometimes it gives us what's called a refer eligible status, which means that that file has to go before the eyes of an underwriter and then look through every part and piece of it to make a decision. Whereas if that automated underwriting system comes back and approve, it gives us a checklist. You get us X, Y, and Z, put that all together, send it to the investor that you want to use. They're going to verify that the X, Y, and Z is there, and your loan's going to close. No ifs, ands, or most of the time buts about it. And so in a situation where a person has never had any credit, that's not a deal breaker, because FHA, for example, allows us to utilize what's called alternative credit, non-traditional credit. And they're specific about what you need to have. You need to have a rental history for 12 months that can be verified by either canceled rent checks or money order receipts, or a verification of rent from a verifiable property management company. If you rent from the guy down the street and you pay him cash, that's not going to work. If you rent from the guy down the street and you pay him check by check, and we can go and get the canceled rent checks, that will work. Or if you rent from ABC Property Management Company and we can look them up in the phone book and find them, then they can tell us, yes, they've paid on time. Number two source is a utility history for the last 12 months. And the local utility providers here in Columbia, they understand this very well. It's very easy for us to access what is their average monthly payment been and what has their payment history been like for the last 12 months. And then we look to another source, whether it be your cell phone bill, your car insurance, if we can verify that you pay daycare regularly by check, some other source that will allow us to build that credit profile for you. And those loans get approved all the time. Whereas if a person went out and, say, got a small unsecured loan from a signature loan company, yes, now they have credit and they have a credit score, but they really don't have anything that makes up that credit score. You know, just because a person has a 660 credit score doesn't mean that they've got the credit to support that score. My recommendation is that if a person is a desired homeowner, don't go out and try and establish your credit with a department store credit card, with a signature loan, something of that nature, because you can achieve the same thing, especially if you've already done it, with a 12-month rental history, 12 months good utilities, and 12 months something else. That is as good as if you had a credit card, an auto loan, something of that nature.
Okay, wonderful.
That's great. I'm glad
All
to hear
right.
that.
Well, now that we know how to get our credit up, let's talk about how to get your house sold so you can get a new one.
Okay.
This is the time of year when people have had their house on the market, and there's a few people that had their house on the market in the spring and summer and it didn't sell, and they still want to sell it. And so let's talk about what you need to know to get your house sold at this time of year. Julie, do you want to talk about it?
That would be great. And what a homeowner needs to do is reassess the market right immediately. First, have to decide, well, do I still want to sell it? And let's say that they do, and then just let's reassess the marketplace. What's happened since the spring or the summer? So I think the best way to do that is to interview agents. And I would recommend that the homeowner choose maybe 2 or 3 agents that have shown the property, have a prepared list of questions for those agents, and then ask agents such questions. You showed my property. Which property did they buy and why did they buy it? So they can get a good idea from that. But the goal of this interview is to find an agent who will reliably keep him informed of the real estate market so he can make wise real estate decisions. So some other questions that are very important that I think is, okay, within our price range, how many properties are active on the market? How many have sold? And what have been the average days on the market? And even what's the percentage of sales price to list price? So again, based on that information, they can decide if they want to put their house on the market or not. So, or put it back on the market. And once they decide that they have found the agent who will keep them reliably informed, is they need to realize that there are 3 reasons a buyer will buy. And the first one is location, and then the second one is condition, and the third one is price. Okay, so we can't do anything about the location, but we can about the condition and we can about the price. So a top condition means we're going to get top price. The least or worst condition, we're going to get the least price. So if you like, we can talk about the condition of the property, which means then we get a top price. Do you want to interject anything there?
Well, since price is so critical, do you have a strategy of how you tell people, you know, once they've had you come out and you've looked at the house, how you decide on the right price based on the market data, based on the active listings, how many there are, how much of a supply there is, and the sold data? What's your strategy for picking the price?
Well, the best strategy to obtain the most money in the shortest possible time and with the least inconvenience is to price the property just a tad more than the recent sales. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's important to know that. That's comparable. And then a tad less than those that are actively on the market. So this creates the illusion that we're priced below market. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And therefore, when we have that, it's like we get more interest, more activity, more enthusiasm, so then we stand a much better chance of obtaining a full price offer.
Well, what do you tell the people that say, like I've had this before, they'll say, well, I've had my house on the market for 2 months and I haven't had an offer, but we've got it priced way too low.
You think it's priced too low? If it were priced too low, everybody'd be flocking to this house and everybody'd be making bids. It'd create an auction and the price would go up.
Okay.
It all settles out.
Right, I agree with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that the price should be adjusted down when you have real heavy inventory? Because that's one thing I've tried to figure out is like if you have a year's supply of houses in a certain price range versus a 6-month supply, how should you adjust the price?
You have to look at the competition. Which home is out there that's competing most favorably to ours, and what's that price?
Right.
So if it's $150,000, then I think we need to be a tad less in that active one that is probably next to sell. We want to be the next ones to sell.
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we're gonna undercut the other guy.
Okay, good. Because that's what we want.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, what about the percentage? Like in Columbia, if you have your house priced right, it is going to sell probably within 5% of the asking price. Is it different in Jefferson
No,
City?
it's exactly the same.
It's the same.
It's the same. It's about 95% of the asking price.
Okay. And what about the days on the market?
Average days on the market's around 90, but then again, it depends on the price range. Yeah, certain price ranges take longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think ours are longer. I think we have about 120 days or 150 days average days on the market,
Really?
depending on the
Yeah.
price range.
Jeff City is less.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So you picked your agent and you picked your price and you know what the days on the market are. What are your ideas for the condition of the house and getting it in show top condition?
Okay. Very good.
Good question. All right.
Yes, because we're going to start from the outside. We want to be able to attract the buyers inside, so we start from the outside. And some of the things that we can do is landscaping. Another thing that people don't think about is the mailbox, driveways. Are there cracks? Front door, is there a wreath on the door? Windows, are they clean? So we start with that. Do you have any other ideas, suggestions on that?
No, those are good. I can remember about 10 years ago one time that I was driving around and I was looking at houses, and I was a realtor, but I wasn't working in this area, so everything seemed new to me.
Yeah.
And the house that I ended up buying was the one where I pulled up in front and I looked at it and I thought, this house is so beautiful I couldn't afford it. But I could. I mean, it just looked so beautiful when you pulled up. It looked like it was from out of a postcard.
Number one.
Yeah, so
there
I think,
you go.
yeah, when the buyer goes online and they print out a list of the houses their realtor's given them, they drive around and, you know, if they pull up in front and you've got, you know, dead flowers, your broken storm door, crooked mailbox, then that's not going to be the one where they pull up and say, this is the one I would want to live in.
I have a question. Jefferson City is so hilly. And we have one particular new construction that sits on top of a hill. People don't want to go in, and it's beautiful inside. I don't know how to get around that.
Yeah, I had
haven't
a
figured that
listing
out.
like that before. You just finally have to have the person that doesn't care.
I guess
Because
so.
they're like, wow, I'm getting this house for like $10,000 less because the driveway's steep.
Yeah, it all boils down to price, doesn't it?
Right, the price. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'll deal with that hill for a lesser price. Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so the people are outside and they want to see it. What do
Yes.
you tell your clients about the showing instructions?
Oh,
When
showing
people want to show the
instructions.
house?
Oh, yes. It's very good to have
From a seller's point of view.
from the seller's point of view.
Yeah, but the reality therapy for the seller. Not what they want, but what they're willing to work with on the showings.
Is it possible, Mr. Seller, to keep the house in show-ready condition? So if someone pulls up and loves the outside, wants to see it right then, is it okay to call and you'll let us in? That would be ideal on the spur of the moment. And I know it's like living in a model home if it's possible to do. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pet peeve of mine. Is I'll be at Remax and I'll hear people say, "Oh, you can't show that without 4 hours notice,"
Right.
or "You can't show it after 5. You can't show it when the baby's taking a nap. You can't show it
Yes.
if the seller's not home, and you can't show it if you have shoes on." It's like, come on,
right.
it's a buyer's market. Please let me show the house.
Yes, we've attracted the buyer to the house from the outside. Let's go in.
All
Yeah.
right. So once you get in,
Yes.
okay.
Once you get in, kitchen and baths are very important. But first of all, step in the foyer. You have to have a good feeling as soon as you step inside. You want the buyer to say, "This is it." So everything, once you step inside the home, it is good to have the lights on, the curtains open, as much light in as possible, so it's very welcoming. It would be good to have, if it's again possible, bread baking in the oven. So then we've got the sight and we've got the nose and then the visual. So you just kind of draw them in. So that's important. And other important rooms, the kitchen and the bathrooms. They need to sparkle, and the counters need to be cleaned off.
Okay, well, how much stuff? I tell people, if you don't use it every day, it shouldn't be out on the counter.
Correct. I like that.
Okay, all right. Now, what about the smell? You mentioned the bread baking. Do you ever recommend people use air fresheners or candles?
Oh, the air fresheners might be a little overpowering. I've had people mention that, buyers mention it's overpowering. But candle burning is more subtle, so I think that would be fine.
Okay, all right. I
Yeah.
usually tell people no candles or air fresheners just because I don't know what the candle would be. It could just happen to be something the person's allergic to, and then
It
they'll
could
be in
be.
and out of there in 5 minutes.
You're right, absolutely. Something else that's important is to have everything cleared off the refrigerator. You know, we all put stuff on the refrigerator. Yeah, so that needs to be clear.
Okay, I tell people that too.
Yeah.
I also tell people, I don't tell people to bake bread, but I tell them, I think a good way to get your house sold is to bake cookies. But when I say that, I don't mean bake a dozen cookies, because I had a client tell me that she would bake a dozen cookies every time the house was sold or shown, and she would eat them all.
Oh, she'd eat them all.
Right, so I had to tell her, no, I mean, go to the store and get the little thing that is a perforated square of a dozen cookies, and every time the house is going to be shown, you bake 3, leave them on a plate, and then when the people come in, they're there and they can eat them. If they don't eat them, immediately throw them away.
Oh, yeah. Don't want
They're
to
air
eat them.
freshener.
They're air fresheners.
So, yeah.
Oh, gosh. Isn't that interesting? Well, very good.
What about animals?
Oh, we love our pets, but it's better that they not be underfoot. So if you have a little doggy carrier, whatever, it'd be good to put the puppy in there. And kitty cats, they usually hide. So I think that's okay if they're inside, because where are you going to put them?
Yeah, if you tell them to get in the car because you're going to go for a ride, I don't think they'll cooperate.
I don't think they will, not the kitty cats.
Yeah.
So.
But the
yeah.
dogs, I tell people no dogs in the house. I don't let them leave them in the house.
Okay, so you tell them to go for a little car trip.
Yeah,